Iran's elections accomplished, what's next? Conference, Culture, Discussion, Human Rights at Hanover's Schwanenberg. Friday the 21st of June 2013. Just 1 week after presidential elections in Iran, experts on Iran and human rights organizations met to exchange views in public on the perspectives for the civil society in Iran and consequences of the results for Europe. Keynote by Professor D. Gholamazad, evaluations by Dr. K. Sido, Society for Threatened People, Lydia Boons, International Organization to Preserve Human Rights in Iran, and Tessa Spethman from Amnesty University Group Hanover. Chair of the conference, H. Garbel, MareIran.de, Music and Poetry by the Pearl Ensemble and Barbara Naziri. Iran's coming president will be Hassan Rouhani. 2 weeks ago, just before the presidential elections, not few analysts were convinced that it could have been Saeed Jalili. 1 week after the elections, and with Hassan Rouhani chosen by a majority of those who accepted the tight voting conditions in Iran, human rights organizations all over the world expressed concern that Mr. Rouhani should keep to his promises and improve the human rights situation and free all political prisoners. Meanwhile, some human rights organizations gathered in Hanover, Germany, on Friday the 21st of June 2013, in a conference on the perspectives for civil society in Iran after Mr. Rouhani will have taken over. After Mrs. Naziri recited a poem about an ant that unites with other ants to withstand the tyrannical system of the scorpions, the moderator of the conference, Mr. H. Garbel, who runs a background information website on Iran called MareIran.de, introduced the circumstances of the latest elections.
Professor Gholamazad, danke, dass Sie gekommen sind, auch wenn der Wind immer wieder hier mitspielen will. Was haben Sie uns für Thesen mitgebracht zu den Wahlergebnissen im Iran?
Vielen Dank für die Einladung. Angesichts der Fragestellung habe ich einige Thesen formuliert. Zunächst einmal über die Funktion der Wahlen für die
Professor Gholamazad delivered the keynote speech on what he analysed is the nature of the system and the conditions for a serious change in favour of respect for human, citizen and social rights, and ecological and economical prospects for the future of Iran's population. Professor Gholamazad stressed two facts. 1. The expansionist ideology of Velayat-e-Faqih, hiding behind the mask of Islam, including non-tolerance for anyone who doesn't follow this interpretation, with no prospect of change, as Mr. Rouhani's record until now shows a tight loyalty to the leader and to the system. And 2, the lack of possibilities to raise organizations within Iran and participate in creating a strong civil society that is dedicated to improving life for every Iranian and not just an elite group. Finally, he concluded that Western governments must focus on human rights instead of negotiations about the nuclear case, because a democratic Iran would not need to be feared for its aggressiveness.
Und Rouhani meint auch ganz geschickt, dass die Gespräche auch mit der
Mrs. Boons followed as the next speaker on behalf of the International Organization to Preserve Human Rights in Iran. She gave a summary of some commentaries on the elections in the Western press and concluded that her organization will keep an eye on Mr. Rouhani's performance concerning human rights and continue protests and street actions in favor of the suppressed and unjustly treated people in Iran.
And we also have to keep informing the people in Iran about our actions and support to encourage them in their resistance. In fact, the election of Rouhani as a new president does not change the course of our actions, because we think that the actions of the international civic society should only stop when people in Iran can shape their own lives and live without fear or repression.
Dr. Kamal Sido, a Syrian-born expert on Near East, who spoke on behalf of the Society for Threatened People based in Göttingen, Germany, expressed his worries that Iran might face the same fate as Syria, and Iran could be torn apart if the questions of the circumstances of ethnic and religious minorities are not dealt with in an all-embracing manner. He requested that Mr. Rouhani should stick to his promises and raised 3 demands: local autonomy for ethnic minorities in the frame of an Iranian confederation, freedom of belief for each religious community, abolishment of the death penalty, and complying with international human rights standards. Finally, Mrs. Tessa Spethman, representing Amnesty International University Group, Hanover, gave an outline of Amnesty's request to respect human rights in Iran. She introduced the case of the student Majid Tavakoli, who was jailed after a speech he held at the university in Tehran after the rigged elections of 2009. She invited the audience to help with petitions for individuals' rights and help keep an eye on the whole situation. After a discussion round with the audience that was interested in both the political surrounding of Iran and the human rights questions, Mrs. Spethman read from a letter of Nasrin Sotoudeh to her daughter. A poem dedicated to Mrs. Sotoudeh by Rasoul Moattamedi called Inscribed was recited in combination with music. Finally, Mrs. Naziri ended the conference with a poem about the earth of the home country, which she dedicated to Omid Kokabi, another prisoner of the regime.
Keines meiner Worte steht zum Verkauf. Bringt mir Datteln, mein Freund, und duftenden Schei, damit wir unsere Heimat schmecken. Nichts bleibt vergessen. Nichts.
Mr. Garbel reminded the audience of the case of a political prisoner in Evin who had lost his vital interest to survive. When he learned that there were Europeans taking interest in the situation of political prisoners in Iran, he claimed that saved his life and inspired him to resist. Thus, the audience at this kind of conference gives support and inspires courage and hope for the people in Iran to take care of their future freedom.